The first rumble rolled over Briar Creek at 4:17 p.m., long before the weatherman said it would. No one in town thought much of it at first, after all. Late summer in Maine was famous for unpredictable storms, but there was something off about this one. The thunder didn't crash and fade the way it should have. It lingered like an echo that didn't want to die. On Main Street, Earl Jennings looked up from the hood of the Ford he was repairing. The air felt heavy, thicker than it had any right to be. His shirt clung to his back. The clouds weren't just dark, they were bruised, swollen and purple, like the sky had been beaten. Across the street, Martha Doyle was closing up the Corner Cup, the only cafe left after the pandemic wiped out half of Briar Creek's businesses. She saw Earl standing there, looking skyward, his wrench hanging loose in one hand. "Forecast said tomorrow," she called out. Earl didn't answer. The hair on his arms was standing straight up. By 5, the wind had picked up enough to make the power lines hum. The first sheet of lightning turned the town white for half a heartbeat, so bright that the outline of the church steeple burned into everyone's retinas. Then came the scream. Not thunder, not metal, something else. Something that rode the thunder. Sheriff Dan Corbett was 2 miles out of town, responding to a call from the old Miller farm when he heard it. His cruiser's radio crackled with static just as the scream split the sky. It sounded like a woman or maybe a child screaming inside the storm. Dan gripped the wheel tighter. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. The Miller place had been empty for years, ever since the old man hanged himself in the barn during the '98 flood. But now, in the shifting lightning, Dan could swear he saw light coming from one of the upstairs windows. Back in town, Lila Jennings, Earl's teenage daughter, sat cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through TikTok videos on her cracked phone. The storm outside made the power flicker, but she barely noticed until her screen froze, mid-scroll and filled with static. Then the voice came through. "You can't hide from it, Lila." Her head snapped up. What the hell? She turned off her phone, but the voice kept talking. It came from her Bluetooth speaker, from the unplugged radio, from inside the walls. "Thunder Road takes what it's owed." Lila screamed, and Earl was up the stairs in seconds. He found her pointing at the wall like it had personally threatened her. "It was in there," she cried. Her voice had said. Another flash of lightning cut her off. For a moment, Earl saw a shadow under her window, a figure standing motionless in the rain, looking up. Then darkness again. When he rushed to the window, there was nothing. Briar Creek had one road in and out Route 9, but locals called it Thunder Road because of how it flooded during every big storm. The highway ran straight through the forest and down a sharp hill that always collected water, creating a kind of temporary lake that swallowed headlights whole. People said ghosts lived there, victims of a bus crash from the 1960s when a lightning bolt struck the driver dead. But that was just a story people told at the bar. Tonight, though, something moved in that water. Dan's cruiser headlights hit the flooded dip around 5:40. The rain was coming down so hard his wipers couldn't keep up. Through the sheets of water, he saw shapes too tall for deer, too thin for people, standing knee-deep in the flood. He stopped the car. They weren't moving, just standing, like they were waiting for him. Then one of them smiled. It wasn't possible he couldn't have seen that through the storm, but he did. A wide, white grin where no face should have been. "Dispatch," Dan said into the radio, his voice trembling. "I'm seeing static." Then a voice, not the dispatcher's. "Go back, Danny boy." Thunder Road's hungry tonight. The radio went dead. By 7, the storm hit full force. The town lost power. The sirens wailed for 3 minutes before dying. Martha Doyle lit candles in her cafe and tried not to notice how the windows pulsed with light every time the thunder cracked. The glow wasn't white, it was green, sickly and alive. She heard a knock on the door. When she opened it, a little boy stood there. He was drenched, barefoot, and holding something, a toy truck missing one wheel. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Martha asked. The boy looked up at her with hollow eyes. "My daddy says we can't go home." "The road's open again?" "The road? It's Thunder Road," he whispered. "It's open."
Before she could respond, lightning flashed and the boy was gone.
Before she could respond, lightning flashed and the boy was gone. Only the toy truck remained, dripping rainwater onto the tile. It rolled forward on its own. By 9 p.m., Earl, Lila, and a half-dozen other townspeople had gathered at the church. The old generator hummed weakly in the basement, casting everyone in flickering orange light. Father Callahan, no relation to the one from Salem's Lot, Earl always joked was leading them in prayer. "Lord, we ask your protection from this storm," and the church doors slammed open hard enough to rattle the windows. Sheriff Dan stood there, soaked to the bone, eyes wild. "They're coming," he said. "Who?" He pointed outside to where the rain fell in silver sheets. "The ones from the road." The Church of St. Agnes had stood in Briar Creek since 1891, its bell tower leaning a little to the east, like it was tired of praying. Inside, pews scraped and candles guttered, as Earl Jennings and 2 others shoved a bookcase against the heavy front doors. "Won't do much if it wants in," Earl muttered. Sheriff Dan dropped a soaked jacket onto the floorboards. "We keep it out as long as we can." The thunder outside answered him, one long, rolling growl that seemed to come from under the ground rather than the clouds. Dust sifted down from the rafters. Lila clutched her phone to her chest even though there was no service. She'd tried recording the storm earlier. Every playback came out as whispers and a sound like breathing. Father Callahan made the sign of the cross, his voice shaking. "We're in the Lord's house. Nothing unholy can cross this threshold." Martha Doyle snorted. "That's what they said about the flu." No one laughed. Lightning splintered the stained glass window of St. Michael's, spearing the devil. For an instant, everyone saw faces in the rain. Outside, droves of them pressed against the glass as if the storm had a crowd. Lila screamed. When the thunder followed, the faces were gone, but the window had changed. The archangel's sword now pointed downward, toward the congregation. "Don't look at it," Dan ordered. He was pacing near the back, hand on his holster like a man ready to arrest the weather itself. Earl cornered him. "You said you knew who they were, the ones from the road." Don rubbed his temples. "Not who? What? He'd been 21 that summer, working night shifts at the old paper mill?" The factory dumped runoff straight into the creek, and when the August storms came, the smell of bleach and sulfur rose thick enough to choke a man. One night, he and 3 friends, Tom Miller, Angie Price, and Joey Rudd, had taken a 6-pack out on Route 9. Rain had just started. They dared each other to drive through the flooded dip, headlights cutting through the sheets of water. "Thunder Road," Angie had said, laughing. "Bet the ghost'll hitch a ride." They never saw the truck coming the other way. Dan's eyes unfocused as he told it. "It hydroplaned head-on. Joey didn't make it. Angie either. I crawled out before the water took the cars." Earl's mouth tightened. "And you kept this quiet?" "There was no proof," Dan said. By morning, the flood had carried everything downstream. They listed it as a washout accident. He looked toward the window where lightning flickered green. "But I still hear M when it storms. Every time." The organ in the corner began to play. No one was near it. Low, discordant notes rolled through the church like something breathing through the pipes. Father Callahan ran to it, pulling out every stop, but the keys kept pressing on their own. Then came voices, soft at first, then louder. A choir without words. The sound wasn't outside anymore. It was inside the air. Joey, Dan whispered. A name hung there, swallowed by thunder. The candles went out. Martha fumbled for a lighter. The tiny flame showed faces around, hurt, terrified, pale, and wet with sweat. "We have to leave," she said. Earl shook his head. "Road's flooded. You'd drown before you hit the bridge." Lila clutched his arm. "Dad," the voice had said. "Thunder Road takes what it's owed." "What does that mean?" Before he could answer, something hit the door from the outside. Once, twice, a third time, harder, it cracked. Don drew his pistol. "Stay back." Another crash, and a hand gray, slick with rainwater, punched through the gap, groping blindly. Its nails scraped the crucifix nailed above the entryway, hissing like meat on a skillet. Father Callahan shouted, "In the name of God," and jammed a candlestick into the hole. The hand withdrew, leaving a smear of something dark and brackish that steamed in the candlelight. The thunder rolled again, closer. Every phone in the room buzzed at once, dead batteries. Powerless screens suddenly lit. Words crawled across them in the same jagged text. "Come to the road." Lila dropped hers like it was red hot. The floor vibrated beneath their feet. Dan's radio came to life, spitting static. Through it, a voice said, "Danny boy, time to finish the ride." He fell to his knees. "Joey." Lightning ripped open the roof, a single blinding spear that blew the cross off the steeple. Rain poured straight into the nave, extinguishing every flame. In the flash, they all saw the same thing. The pews were empty except for them, but water pooled down the center aisle, and in that water shapes were walking. Earl grabbed Leela and Martha and pulled them toward the sacristy door. Basement, now. Father Callahan tried to stop him. "We can't abandon the altar." A bolt of lightning struck the bell tower. The old bell came loose, crashing through the ceiling and landing where the priest had stood. The sound it made wasn't metal. It was a human scream. "Go," Earl shouted. They stumbled down the narrow steps, the air thick with mildew and ozone. Behind them, the church groaned, every board expanding as if breathing. Downstairs, the generator sputtered. Its single light bulb flickered between yellow and blue. "Dan," Lila called up. "Come on." But the sheriff hadn't followed. Upstairs, Dan stood alone amid shattered pews. Rainwater reached his boots. He could see reflections in it, faces he'd buried 30 years ago. "Hey, Joey," he said again. The water replied with voices overlapping, male and female, all whispering through the thunder. "Debt, unpaid, blood for rain." He raised his gun. "If you want me, take me." The church door burst open, and the flood came in. Earl and the others heard the roar before they saw it. Water poured down the stairwell, carrying bits of pews and hymn books. Earl slammed the basement door, bracing it with the table. The light bulb swung wildly. In its glow, they saw a mural on the wall. None of them remembered figures kneeling in rain, hands lifted toward a dark sky. Beneath them, faded words, "The road always remembers." Lila touched the paint. It was wet, and she heard it again, that same whisper from her phone, this time in her ear. "Come to the road, Lila." She turned. The basement window, half buried in mud, showed a sliver of outside. Beyond it, the rain had turned silver, alive. Shapes drifted past, faces pressed to the glass, Martha backed away, shaking her head. They're calling her. Earl grabbed his daughter's hand. They're not taking anyone. But Lila's eyes were unfocused, as if she were listening to music no one else could hear. A bang from the stairwell. The door splintered, water spilling in ankle deep. Earl shouted over the roar. There's a drain tunnel behind the Furnasald storm line to the creek. They waded toward it, Father Callahan clutching his Bible like a weapon. When he looked back, the light bulb exploded, plunging them into dark. Only lightning from the tiny window gave them flashes of Vision Earl's face streaked with mud, Martha crawling through the narrow drain, Lila hesitating at the opening. Go. Ah! He told her. She shook her head. Dad, it's saying your name now. The whisper rippled through the storm. Earl Jennings froze. The voice wasn't angry now, it was pleading, almost kind. You took what wasn't yours? Truck, the bodies, the lie. Earl's mouth went dry. What lie? The thunder answered, forming words that only he heard. You buried them under the road. In that flash of memory, he saw himself 20 years younger, working construction when Route 9 was repaved after the flood. He'd been foreman then. They'd found bones in the mud, Joey Rudd's car, the missing driver, even Angie's bracelet. He'd recognized them instantly. Out. And he'd told the crew to pour asphalt right over it. Cheaper that way, the company said. Faster. Now the storm remembered. The drain tunnel roared like a throat. Martha and Father Callahan crawled through first, vanishing into the dark. Lila tugged her father's sleeve. We have to go. He didn't move. I did this, he whispered. It's me at once. A new flash of lightning illuminated the basement. Behind Earl, water shaped itself into figures' gray silhouettes rising from the pool, mouths open but eyes empty. Dad, Lila screamed. He turned, kissed her forehead once, and shoved her toward the drain. Tell your mother I tried. The last thing she saw before crawling into the tunnel was her father standing knee-deep in the water, arms raised. As the storm took shape around him, faces merging into one enormous, pulsing grin. The drain tunnel was barely 4 feet high, brick on one side and clay on the other, water sheeting along its floor. The smell of rust and swamp rot clawed at their throats. Lila led, her phone held out for light, though the screen flickered more than it glowed. Behind her crawled Father Callahan, gasping with the effort, and last came Martha Doyle, cursing every few yards. The roar of the storm above was muffled here, as if they'd crawled inside the body of something huge that was breathing in slow, wet gulps. Each rumble of thunder made the bricks vibrate. Keep moving, Martha said. If we stop, we drown. Lila's knees splashed through a deeper pocket of water. How far does this go? Under Maine, Callahan panted. Out to the creek. Built in the 50s when the mill flooded, lightning somewhere far off turned the tunnel water white for a heartbeat. When the flash passed, ripples moved against the current, though something farther in was crawling toward them. At the next juncture, the tunnel split in two. One side sloped upward, dry bricks dark with mold. The other slanted down into black water that steamed faintly. Lila froze. Voices slithered through the pipes, faint at first, then distinct, like a radio stuck between stations. Lila Jennings. Come see what your father built. She dropped the phone. It landed in the water, screen still glowing, drifting away like a drowned lantern. Martha caught her arm. Ignore it. That ain't real. It knows my name. Lila whispered. Storm knows everybody's name tonight, the old woman said, and pushed her forward. Behind them, Father Callahan muttered a prayer that turned into a cough. The tunnel air was thickening, every breath tasting of metal. A circle of light glimmered overhead, a manhole cover half loose. Rainwater poured through it like a waterfall. Martha climbed first, bracing her back against the wall and pushing. The lid didn't move. Rust, she grunted. Or something sitting on it. Callahan joined her, both of them heaving. The metal shrieked and lifted an inch. Outside, the thunder cracked directly above. Through the gap, they saw a flash of sky, and for an instant the lightning didn't show clouds. It showed faces pressed to the underside of the storm, as if the heavens themselves were made of drowned souls. The priest dropped the lid. Sweet Mary, water surged, slamming him against the wall. He slipped, vanished under the froth. Lila screamed and grabbed his sleeve, hauling with all her weight. When she pulled him up, his eyes were wide and shining with terror. I saw them, he gasped. Rows and rows, walking under the road like parishioners. The tunnel widened unexpectedly into a chamber where two old storm lines met. In the center stood a block of concrete the size of a coffin. Rusted tools lay scattered around its shovels, a jackhammer head, an oil drum stamped with Briar Creek Public Works. Lila brushed mud from the top. Letters were carved there, deep but half erased by water. R9 Site Burial Mill Accident, 1958. Martha backed up. Burial. Callahan traced the carving with trembling fingers. They built the road right over this. The storm above groaned. The water at their ankles began to swirl, forming small whirlpools that tugged at their boots. A single air bubble rose from a crack in the stone, bursting with a sigh that almost sounded like a word. Lila heard it clearly. Help! The chamber shook. Cracks spider-webbed across the ceiling bricks. A deep booming came from farther down the tunnel. Steady, rhythmic, like footsteps too heavy for any living thing. Callahan pressed his cross to his chest. It's coming for us. No, Lila said quietly. What's coming for what's under this? Another step. Water geysered through the crack in the stone. The jet hit the roof, hissing steam. The word burial peeled off in flakes of cement. Martha grabbed Lila's wrist. We move now. They scrambled into the lower tunnel just as the ceiling collapsed behind them. The last thing Lila saw before the darkness swallowed the chamber was a pale hand rising from the shattered stone, fingers searching the air. The next passage angled sharply downward. They half ran, half crawled through waist-deep water that glowed faintly green, lit by lightning leaking through cracks in the road above. Every bolt showed more bones in the walls, ribs caught in the brick, skulls fused with clay. Martha whispered, Lord, they paved the whole damn town over the dead. Callahan's voice cracked. The road was cursed from the day it was laid. The thunder answered a sound that wasn't weather anymore. It was breathing huge, wet, contented breathing. The tunnel opened into a vast culvert under Route 9. Rainwater poured in cascades from drains high above. In the flashing light, they could see shapes standing on the other side, transparent. Fluid silhouettes, their faces shifting like ripples. The ghosts of the road. One stepped forward, water pouring through the hole in its chest. Its voice was Don Corbett's. You can't stop it. We built our sins into the pavement. Lila shook her head. You're dead. Everyone on this road is, the figure said, and its smile widened until it split the face apart. The storm outside screamed whined through every broken pipe, 1,000 mouths wailing together. The current pulled at them, dragging them toward the opening. "Hold the wall!" Martha shouted. But the suction grew stronger, the water spinning faster around their legs. A new sound split the roar, concrete giving way. Back in the chamber behind them, the burial stone shattered. The rushing current changed color. No longer brown rainwater, but thick and black, carrying chunks of tar and asphalt. The road itself was dissolving, sliding into the culvert. From within that torrent rose a shape vast enough to blot the lightning a storm made flesh, its surface a churning skin of rain and headlights and drowned faces. Its mouth was a sinkhole rimmed with white lines of asphalt. Father Callahan raised his cross. In the name of the wind, tore the words from his throat. Martha seized Leela's hand. "Creek's ahead, jump when I say." They half swam, half fell down the slope, the roar behind them turning into laughter. The same hollow chuckle Earl used to make when he lied his way through confession. Suddenly the tunnel spat them out into open air. Cold night rain slapped their faces. They landed in the swollen creek, tumbling through reeds and trash. The storm above boiled black and green, lightning crawling sideways like veins. Behind them, Thunder Road buckled. Asphalt folded, telephone poles snapped, and the entire strip of highway sank into the earth as if swallowed. Through the roar came a single drawn-out moan, the voice of the town itself collapsing. Lila clung to Martha's arm until they hit a patch of shallow bank. The priest surfaced farther downstream, coughing up water. For the first time in hours there was silence. No thunder, no voices, only rain. They stared up at the place where the road had been. Nothing remained but a gaping wound full of mist. The storm seemed to be retreating, pulling its clouds north toward the woods. Martha laughed once, harsh and unbelieving. "Guess the road finally took what it was owed." Lila shivered. "Then why does it still feel like it's listening?" Father Callahan looked at the sky. Lightning flickered one last time, and in that light they saw the clouds form a face. Cyril Jennings' eyes closed, mouth moving as if whispering a prayer. The rain softened, the face faded, but beneath the mud at their feet, something kept pulsing us slow. Steady beat like the heart of the storm still buried, waiting. When dawn finally dragged itself over Briar Creek, the town didn't look real anymore. The storm had chewed away half the trees, peeled the roofs off houses like tin can lids, and turned Main Street into a mud river. Smoke hung low, pale and sour. Somewhere a dog barked once and didn't stop. Leela sat on the bank with a blanket around her shoulders, watching the creek slide by. Her skin still smelled like lightning. Martha and Father Callahan huddled near the remains of a police cruiser that had washed up sideways. None of them spoke for a long time. When the first rescue siren echoed across the valley, it sounded small and tinny against the emptiness. "They'll come looking," Martha said, voice cracked from the cold. "They'll see the road's gone." Callahan coughed into his hand. "Gone isn't the right word." He nodded toward the ridge where Thunder Road had been. Look, at first it looked like fog. Then the wind shifted and Lila saw it clearly. A fresh strip of asphalt gleaming under the rising sun. Perfectly smooth. Perfectly straight. It ran where the old road had been, but not quite. This one curved slightly north, cutting through trees that had been holed just hours ago. "Jesus," Martha muttered. "They can't fix that overnight." "They didn't," Callahan said quietly. "They built itself." They climbed the slope to see. Tire tracks from rescue trucks ended abruptly at the edge of the new pavement, as if no one had dared step farther. The air above it shimmered faintly, the way heat does on desert asphalt. But the morning was cool. Lila crouched, touched the surface. It wasn't warm or cold. It was alive, a low vibration under her fingertips, like a heartbeat buried deep beneath tar. Yanked her hand back. By noon, the National Guard had arrived. They set up tents, generators, and bright orange barriers across what they still called Thunder Road. The state sent engineers, then surveyors, then reporters. None of them could explain why the fresh asphalt was chemically different carbon ratio off the charts, microscopic movement in its structure, as though the pavement repaired itself. They put up signs: danger, unstable terrain, no entry. That night the barriers were gone, flattened, no tracks in the mud. By morning, the road had stretched another mile into the woods. Leela stayed in her father's house, though half the windows were gone. She couldn't sleep. Every time thunder rolled on the horizon, she saw that pale hand rising from the broken stone. Around midnight, she went out to the porch. The wind was quiet. Crickets should have been singing, but they weren't. Then she heard a distant humming, like engines far away. She followed it to where the new road began. Soft glow moved along the surface. Headlights, but there was no car, only light sliding forward by itself. She watched them drift past, twin beams cutting through the mist, disappearing into the trees. Behind them came another pair, then more. Hundreds of phantom cars gliding down a road that hadn't existed yesterday. When she finally turned back, she realized her footprints on the shoulder had already filled in. The gravel smoothed itself over, unbroken. The priest found her the next morning sitting on the church steps, staring at the new blacktop where it vanished into the forest. He looked worse, gray skin, trembling hands, eyes red from no sleep. "I've been dreaming," he said. "The same thing over and over. The people who drowned in the storm, they're walking the road. Each night they go farther." "Where?" Lila asked. He pointed toward the tree line, to whatever's calling from the other end. Martha joined them, dragging a cigarette and looking small under the overcast sky. "Allahan," she said, "maybe you ought to stop looking for meaning. Storm's over. Let the road lie." But the priest shook his head. "You don't understand.
Oh.
Roads are promises. They always lead somewhere. This one was built on bones. Now it's keeping its promise." That night, the rain came back. Not hard. Just steady enough to blur the streetlights. Lila sat by her window and watched the new road pulse faintly with each flash of lightning. Something moved in the distance. A figure walking toward town. She couldn't be sure, but it looked like her father, Earl Jennings, still wearing his county work jacket, soaked and gleaming. He stopped under a lamppost, looked up at her window, and smiled the same tired, guilty smile he'd worn the night he died. Then the light blinked out, and he was gone. Down the hill, the asphalt gleamed a little darker, as though it had swallowed him back. The following Sunday, only 9 people came to St. Mary's. The rest had either left town or refused to go outside after dark. Callahan's sermon was strange, half prayer, half warning. "The flood washed away sin," he said, voice trembling through the empty pews. "But sin don't stay gone. It builds roads. It leads us home again." Outside, thunder rolled softly, though no clouds were visible. The church windows shook. Leela thought she heard tires hissing on wet asphalt, though the nearest highway was 5 miles away. When she turned toward the door, she saw the shadow of the steeple stretch down Main Street. bending unnaturally until it touched the beginning of Thunder Road. By midweek, people started disappearing. First, a pair of teenagers from the shelter camp. They'd gone to take a look at the road after curfew. Then the surveyor. Then a trooper whose cruiser was later found half melted into the asphalt. Every night the road grew longer. The forest along its edge thinned, trees leaning outward like spectators. And sometimes, when lightning flared far off, you could see shapes standing where the pavement vanished into fog figures waiting in line. Martha came to Lila's porch with a lantern. "Pack a bag. We're leaving tonight." Lila nodded but didn't move. "You hear it too, don't you? That hum?" Martha's face tightened. "Yeah, like the world's breath in through a pipe." They drove as far as the old mill bridge before the road ahead shimmered Thunder Road, cutting across their path where it hadn't before. The blacktop glowed faintly, as if lit from below. The truck stalled. "No," Martha whispered, turning the key again and again. "Shh, no, no, not now." A voice echoed through the trees. Not thunder, not wind, something deeper. "Come home." The steering wheel vibrated under Leela's hands. The headlights dimmed, then flared white. The road ahead looked like a mouth opening. Martha grabbed Lila's arm. "Run." They scrambled out, slipping in mud. Behind them, the truck rolled forward by itself, tires screeching softly until it disappeared into the blacktop like a stone into water. The surface rippled once, then went still. By dawn, rescue teams found the two women wandering through the woods miles from town, soaked and shivering. They didn't remember how they got there. When they were airlifted out, the pilots swore there was no road below, just mist swirling in patterns like tire tracks. But later, when the mist cleared, the satellite images showed something new. A single lane of asphalt winding through the forest, leading north toward nothing. The map update labeled it automatically. Thunder Road Ixt, and deep in the forest where it ended, a new subdivision sign had appeared overnight fresh wood. Clean letters burned into it. "Welcome to New Briar Creek," the first thing Lila noticed when she drove past the Welcome to New Briar Creek sign was that the paint was still wet. 5 years, and the letters looked as if someone had brushed them that morning. Below the name was a slogan, freshly stenciled in cheery blue, "Built to last." The slogan twisted something in her stomach. She had promised herself she'd never come back. But when the postcard arrived, no return address, only "you forgot something" written in neat block letters, she couldn't stay away. Now here she was, idling at the edge of a town that shouldn't exist, watching her windshield wipers sweep aside drizzle that smelled faintly like hot tar. New Briar Creek looked like it had been poured from a mold. Identical houses, white fences, lawns trimmed to the exact same height. Kids on bikes rode in perfect loops around cul-de-sacs, never looking up. Even the dogs didn't bark. They just trotted to the edge of their yards, stared at her car, and turned away. Every street connected to Thunder Road. It was the spine of the new town. Black and gleaming, lined with fresh lampposts that hummed quietly even in daylight. Lila slowed as she passed them, and noticed that each lamppost had a small metal plaque at its base, dedicated to the memory of Briar Creek. The date underneath was today's. At first she thought it was her imagination, but then she saw them clearly, people she recognized. Mr. Dugan, who had owned the hardware store before the flood, sweeping his porch. Ellie Turner, the librarian, watering plastic flowers. Even the mayor, Hank Robbins, driving his old red pickup. the one that had been found crushed under a fallen tree years ago. They all looked better, younger, skin smooth, eyes glassy but calm. When Lila waved, they smiled politely and kept doing whatever they were doing, like actors waiting for their cue. The air smelled of ozone and pavement after rain. Her chest tightened with the memory of the storm, the whispering pipes, the faces in the clouds. Something deep under the tires of her car seemed to throb in time with her heartbeat. She parked near what used to be St. Mary's. Now the sign read, New Briar Community Center. The steeple was gone. The cross replaced with a simple metal spire that gleamed black in the weak sun. As she climbed the steps, the doors opened before she touched them. Inside smelled of wax and asphalt. Rows of chairs faced a stage. On it stood Father Callahan or something wearing his shape. He looked 10 years younger, hair thick again, eyes clear and bright. When he saw her, he smiled the gentle, tired smile she remembered from the confession booth. "Leela," he said, "you came back." Her mouth went dry. How? How are you here?" He tilted his head. "Same way you are. The road brought us home." People began filing into the hall, dozens of them, silent, orderly. She recognized nearly every face, men who'd drowned in the mill flood, women who'd vanished during cleanup, the teenagers who'd gone to take a look. They sat in perfect rows, hands folded. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying that low electric hum again. Callahan spread his arms. "We were lost," he said softly. "But the road remembered. Gave us a new place, a better one." The storm was only the cleansing. Lila backed away. "You're not alive." His smile didn't falter. "Neither are you, child. Not since that night by the creek." She froze. "That's not true, isn't it?" He stepped closer. His eyes were no longer eyes, just deep, glossy black like fresh tar. "Do you remember walking out of the water? How cold it was? How quiet?" The world tilted. For a moment, she was there again, crawling out of the flooded ditch, rain pounding, thinking she'd survived. But maybe she hadn't. Maybe none of them had. A voice behind her rasped, "Don't listen to him." Lila turned. Martha stood in the doorway, older, soaked from the rain, eyes fierce. She carried a crowbar and a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder. "You took your sweet time," Martha said. Lila's throat worked. "You sent the postcard. Had to make sure you remembered what you left behind." The congregation sat still as statues, faces turned toward the women, but not reacting. Martha looked around. "They eat people, honey. They're the road-weary faces." Callahan, whatever he was, laughed softly. "Everything belongs on a road eventually. Even you." The lights flickered. The hum deepened until the floorboards vibrated. Outside, thunder cracked, though the sky was clear. The floor split open. A black seam of asphalt oozed upward, filling the aisle. From it rose shapes, arms, torsos, heads forming from tar, still glossy and wet. They reached for Lila, mouths opening with that same single word the storm had whispered years ago. "Come." Martha grabbed her hand and pulled. "Move." They bolted out into the street, rain slapping their faces again, though no clouds were visible. The ground trembled beneath their boots. Cracks spread along the curbs, glowing faintly red beneath the pavement. Lila glanced back once. The community center's walls were melting, shingles dripping like wax. From its roof, the new spire bent and twisted, reshaping into something like a lightning rod aimed straight toward the clouds that were beginning to gather. They ran toward the edge of town, toward the sign that said, "Thank you for visiting New Briar Creek." But when they reached it, the sign was gone. In its place stretched endless blacktop, disappearing into fog. Martha gasped for breath. "It's Lupinus." The hum was louder now, steady and mechanical, like 1,000 engines idling under the soil. Lila knelt, pressed her palm to the pavement. She could feel it breathing again, deep and patient. "That's it," she whispered. "That's what it wanted all along, to keep building." The air shimmered. Houses began to rise from the mist ahead, identical, freshly painted, with porch lights already burning. Martha's grip tightened on the crowbar. "Then we break what it's buildin'." They found the place where the new road began, its surface still glistening like cooling lava. Leela tore open the duffel. Inside were flares, gasoline cans, and an old detonator. Martha smiled grimly. "You remember how to start a fire?" They doused the tar. The fumes burned their throats. Lila struck a flare and dropped it. The flame caught instantly, running down the blacktop like a fuse. The earth shuddered. Voices rose from below, hundreds, then thousands, screaming not in pain but warning.
"Now no road ends."
The explosion tore through the fog. For an instant, the world was nothing but light and thunder, the real kind this time. When Lila opened her eyes, she was standing on clean pavement under a bright blue sky. The air smelled fresh, sweet, wrong. She turned and saw a sign at the roadside. "Welcome to Briar Creek." Not New Briar Creek, just Briar Creek. The houses looked the same as before the storm. Children laughed. Church bells rang. And there, down the street, Earl Jennings was sweeping the sidewalk in front of his house. "Morning, sweetheart," he called.
"That storm's coming. Better get inside."
She looked at the horizon. Dark clouds rolling in, low and heavy. The first rumble of thunder. When she glanced down, the asphalt under her shoes pulsed once soft, rhythmic, alive. She smiled faintly, not sure if she was still breathing. "Guess it always was," she whispered. "Built to last." The sky above Briar Creek had that strange, sickly stillness that comes a minute before lightning. No wind, no birds, no movement, just pressure. Lila stood on her father's porch, watching the black line of the horizon swallow the morning light. Everything around her looked too perfect. The houses freshly painted, the lawns clipped, the air scrubbed clean of smoke. When she reached out to touch the porch railing, the wood felt rubbery, pliant, as if the world hadn't finished hardening yet. Inside, a radio crackled to life, though she hadn't touched it. A calm male voice spoke between bursts of static. "High winds expected along Route 9 this evening. Please stay off Thunder Road. Repeat, stay off Thunder Road." She shut it off. The hum beneath her feet continued anyway. Down the street, people were standing in their driveways, facing the same direction toward the curve where Thunder Road began. Every few seconds, one of them would nod slightly, as if listening to someone invisible. When Lila stepped onto the sidewalk, Mr. Duggan turned his head toward her. His eyes were bright, empty headlights. "Morning, Miss Jennings," he said in a cheerful drawl. "You ready for the reopening?" "What reopening?" He gestured toward the horizon. The road. Always was meant to open again. Then he smiled an awful, splitting grin that reached both ears, and went back to staring at the sky. Lila walked faster. Her footsteps made no sound. Each print filled itself in as soon as she lifted her shoe. When the first gust finally came, it carried words. Briar Creek, mile 0. We all souls accounted for. The storm wasn't above anymore. It was under them, a subsonic rumble that vibrated the roots of the town. Streetlights flicked on, though the sun was still out. Their glow pulsed in rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, like a heartbeat trying to sync with hers. She covered her ears. Didn't help. The voice was inside now. You built me. Now drive. An old county truck idled at the curb. The same model her father used to drive. Same dented fender. Keys dangled in the ignition. The radio played nothing but the faint hiss of rain. Lila slid into the seat before she realized she'd moved. The vinyl was warm, familiar. The steering wheel pulsed gently beneath her palms. When she turned the key, the truck started without sound. The engine ran on the same low hum as the road itself. The speedometer needle lifted to 30 before she touched the pedal. The road ahead shimmered, stretching away like a dark ribbon across open fields that shouldn't have existed. She wasn't sure when the town had disappeared behind her. Mile markers flickered past, numbers glowing from inside the metal. 1, 3, 5, 9. Rain began to fall again, vertical and silver, bouncing off the windshield without leaving streaks. In the distance, she saw headlights. At first just one pair, then dozens, all coming the other way. Cars from every decade. Fords from the 50s, Chevys from the 70s, sedans she'd never seen before. Each driver staring straight ahead, faces serene. When they passed, she realized every windshield reflected her own face. Mile 12. The hum deepened. A sign on the shoulder flashed once. Briar Creek next right. But there was no exit, only a widening of the road that formed a perfect circle. She eased off the gas. The truck slowed but didn't stop. The scenery around her blurred. Then repeated same mailbox. Same lightning-blasted tree. Same half-buried milepost. The odometer rolled past 999,999 and began again at 0. Her breath fogged the glass. Each exhale left words she hadn't spoken. Built to last. Built to last. Built to last. The storm clouds dipped low, almost touching the road. Lightning crawled along them like veins of molten steel. From somewhere ahead came the roar of countless engines merging into one. Then she saw it. The original town of Briar Creek half submerged, glowing faintly under the asphalt as if preserved in amber. The church steeple lay sideways beneath the surface. Windows still lit. The world folded in on itself like a dark lung exhaling. Leela saw movement under the road, shapes pressed against the surface, as if the asphalt were a sheet of black ice and something vast swam beneath it. She pressed her palm against the glass. The hum rose to a roar. From the clouds above came voices layered and thick. Every town keeps its storm. Every road remembers its dead. You can pave it, girl, but it don't forget. Lightning struck just ahead, carving a hole in the pavement. Through the smoking crack, she saw the truth. The remains of Thunder Road Construction Company. The workers who'd vanished 50 years ago, still holding their tools. Their bodies weren't bodies anymore, were fused into the road, bones wrapped in tar, faces stretched thin like wax under glass. And right at the center, holding a half-buried steering wheel like a crucifix, was her father, Don Jennings. Memory hit her all at once. She was 10 again, sitting in the truck while her father argued with the men from the county board. They'd been behind schedule, the budget blown, the ground unstable. Thunder Road was supposed to connect Briar Creek to the interstate to open up the town, they said. But the land fought back. Rain every day, mudslides, equipment fried by lightning. And when the last storm came, Dan ordered the crew to keep pouring asphalt even as the ground quaked beneath them. He'd said something then that came back to her now, through the thunder. If we stop, the road takes us. If we finish, maybe it lets us go. They finished. It didn't let them go. The ghost of her father lifted his head beneath the tar. His mouth didn't move, but she heard him clearly, right behind her ear. Been driven a long time, sweetheart. Road's tired. Needs a new one behind the wheel. The truck shuddered. The seatbelt cinched itself tight. Outside, the other cars began circling, headlights blending into a halo of white fire. Each one carried a driver faces Lila recognized. Martha, Earl, Sheriff Mills, all the ones who'd vanished that night. They smiled as they passed, serene and obedient. The storm spiraled downward, a massive rotating funnel that ended not in the sky, but in the road itself, like a heart. Drive, Lila. Just keep the road alive. Tears streaked her face, though the air inside the cab was dry. She thought of the church, of the hymn echoing in the dark. We'll drive till the morning comes. Her father's reflection stared back from the windshield, smiling that weary smile she remembered from the day before he disappeared. It ain't so bad, he said softly. It's just the road now. Someone's gotta steer. Lila looked down. Her hands were already dissolving into black dust, merging with the wheel. But then, through the thunder's roar, she heard something faint and human. Children laughing, real laughter, not the echo of memory. She turned. On the side of the road stood 3 kids, bikes tipped over, watching the glowing cars spin. They were alive, still living in Briar Creek. She realized what the road fed on wasn't souls. It fed on fear, on the living's need to believe the storm would always return. So she made her choice. She floored the accelerator and drove straight toward the funnel. The truck screamed, metal flaying open like skin, lightning pouring through the cabin. As she entered the vortex, everything went white. When the storm finally cleared, Thunder Road was gone. Not destroyed, gone. Just open fields and a scar of blackened earth stretching to the tree line. The county rebuilt, as they always did. Briar Creek shrank back into itself. People said the highway reroute had killed business, but they were glad of the quiet. No one mentioned the missing anymore. Once, years later, a boy on a bike swore he saw headlights under the soil after a rainstorm, glowing softly, moving slow like something still traveling. And sometimes, when the wind blows from the east, it carries a voice. Keep it steady, sweetheart. Roads gotta run. At the county records office, the old highway maps still hang in dusty frames. If you stand close enough and breathe on the glass, the condensation reveals a faint, penciled line that shouldn't exist anymore.
The letters barely visible. Thunder Road active.
Underneath, someone's written in faded red ink, built to last. And if you listen carefully, when thunder rolls over Briar Creek, it sounds like a truck shifting gears.